one of the questions we have for you is, we know who inspired you to start a booktube channel, but why did you start a booktube channel?
Hiya.
Hey, Louise. Hi.
So lovely to see you.
Same here.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm Chris, by the way.
And Emily.
When you messaged me, I wasn't aware, of your podcast, and I've been really enjoying listening to it.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
It's so nice to sort of hear kind of like-minded appraisal of books and just the general enthusiasm. I've become a big fan.
Oh, thank you.
So, yeah, back at you.
Yes.
I particularly love the video of you when you're trying to figure out what to take to read on vacation. The stress of it is real.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I get caught out every time. I do have to plan it now, because otherwise I just get myself in a bit of a, and it's ridiculous. Like, there are very few places you can go to where you're not going to find a book somewhere.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But the idea of getting on an airplane and not having something to read for me or something is just petrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I was on a trip one time, and the only thing in English I could find was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath.
Oh, wow.
So
that's not a holiday read, really. Or maybe in adolescence, I don't know.
Oh my.
Oh gosh. Well, so thank you so much. I mean, for coming on to talk with us.
It's a delight.
Yeah.
It's a delight. And any opportunity to talk about books, really.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just to recap, we thought we would have you just talk about, your experience reading for the Women's Prize for nonfiction. How exciting that they chose to do nonfiction.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you two, I think, from what I can gather, seem to read quite a lot of nonfiction. I would say, more than I do. I don't know whether it's because I was, as a teacher for so long, and so nonfiction was kind of part of my work diet, as it were, or whether I think there's some sexism involved, because I think I grew up thinking, nobody actually said it, but I think I grew up thinking that nonfiction was more for boys and fiction was for girls, and sadly didn't really question it. So it wasn't till this year when they said they were going to launch this prize, and of course Simon, my son from Savidge Reads, we've been really massive fans of the Women's Prize for Fiction here for donkey's years. And so when they said they were going to do this nonfiction prize, it was just, it coincided with me retiring at Christmas. So it was just lucky that I had time. So they very kindly sent me the whole long list.
Oh, lovely.
And I mean, it was, opening that box was a delight. In fact, Simon was here and we opened it together.
Yeah, I watched that video.
Yeah, we both.
All right.
longingly.
Oh.
Well, it was so exciting to see what they were, but also just, how fun to get that box arrive on the porch.
It thrills me every year. I don't, when the fiction arrives, in fact, I sort of missed it this year because I got the non-fiction long list and not the fiction long list. I got the shortlist. So yeah, I sort of have to get my head around that now. No, and what delighted me was the range of topic. Some of them are quite hefty books. They're big books, a lot of them, and I was really worried that there'd be things that I really didn't want to read or didn't have an interest in. But I was absolutely bowled over, and I know now that I'll read lots more nonfiction. I feel like I've been a bit of a fool for not working that out sooner, but hey, it's never too late, is it? So
or never. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing you say about fiction for girls and nonfiction for boys. Ursula Le Guin wrote a really great essay about why Americans don't like dragons. And it was all about that, how, at a certain age, boys can no longer read fantasy. They need to read nonfiction, and fiction and make-believe and fantasy is for girls and women. And, I think that hits a lot of us.
Yeah, she's onto something. I mean, I know from years of working with teenage boys and girls, the boys who read fiction, there's a sparkle about them.
Mm.
You know, you can almost, when you get a new class of kids, you can almost tell. I know that sounds odd. You can sort of sniff them out.
That's fascinating.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, there's something about them that just, you know, and I don't know whether it's the chicken or the egg, of course. I don't know whether it's because of who they are and they chose to read fiction as a result of that, or whether the fiction's had an effect. There's probably a bit of both, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody ought to do some research. They probably have.
Right. Yeah. What grade did you teach?
Secondary school here, so from year 7, which is 11-year-olds, right the way through to 18.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Loved it. But,
Yeah, and that's such a fascinating age too, right? Because that's when kids are really starting to find what they want to read more than what their parents are giving them.
Absolutely.
If they're lucky enough to have parents who give them.
Yeah, quite. And that's really what we were battling against a lot of the time, was that a lot of households now in this country, there isn't a book in the house. So yeah, it's fascinating. Anyway, that's the kind. One of the things I thought you might want to, I know you wanted to know about some of the books that I'd read on the long list, and I can't really talk to you about the shortlist because Simon and I recorded at the weekend our sort of winner video, which was really good fun, and I'm going to really struggle. I'm going to have to make sure I don't say anything, but he will actually kill me, I think.
We don't want to have that. We don't want that responsibility on our hands.
No matricide here. So I can't really talk about that, but there are a few of the books that from the long list that didn't make the short list, and obviously it's interesting, isn't it, how you mull books over, and they you know, as time goes by, it changes your attitude to what you've read. But there were 3 that I thought you might find interesting, and your audience might find interesting, that didn't make it, that I definitely would have selected to go on the shortlist if it had been me.
All right.
So the first one is Matrescence by Lucy Jones. I don't know whether you've come across any of these. And I don't know whether I would pronounce it Matrescence. I don't know whether it's Matrescence, or I'm guessing it is. And it was the first one that I picked off that great big pile, partly because it wasn't too long, because I thought I need to get one under my belt, and partly because at the time I thought the title was a bit pretentious. I thought that's a word that, I mean, I studied, my degree was in classics, so I know a bit of Latin and Greek and things, but I just thought that's why have you called it that? It just seemed, I don't know. I thought I'd almost talked myself out of liking it before I opened the book, which is dreadful, and just shows I would never have bought it. There's no way I think I would have picked it up.
Can you show the cover? Would you mind showing?
Yeah.
Oh,
so I mean, the American version will be different. I think it's out in America now.
I looked for it and I can't find it.
Oh,
I'll look again. Yeah,
such a shame.
I would like to read this one.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it, and if I was awarding the prize next week, I think this would be my pick.
Oh, interesting.
Partly because it's something that I would never have read, but it just, I think this is a book that it's about matrescence, is the act of becoming a mother. So so Lucy writes about the first 12 months, 18 months of her one of her children's lives, but actually she has an older child, so she talks about that as well. So it's part memoir, but it's also an exploration of the science behind what happens to your body when you have a child. And it also looks at the whole social issues around all of that. So the impact on society of having all these women who are going through this process, because we talk all the time about, with babies, them gaining weight, and are they sleeping, and are they doing this, that, and the other, all these milestones, but nobody really talks about what's happening to the mother's body and the mother's brain. And I mean, I've had 3 children, 2 stepchildren, and there was so much in here that I had no idea was something that had happened to my body.
Mm.
She talks about things like sleep deprivation, the idea that you've got all these women walking around trying to go to work, trying to function on probably less than 4 hours sleep as an average. And she does things like compares it to when the US was using sleep deprivation relatively recently as a way of getting information from prisoners. And even then, it was factored in that in any 24-hour period, the prisoners had to have 4 hours sleep.
Mm.
So, you know, it's kind of, so she's sort of really questioning the way that society looks at mothers and at women and in the workplace, but also in all sorts of other spheres. So it just really bombarded me with, there was some fantastic stuff about the research on the brain that's being done. She went off to America and went into some lab where they'd been doing imaging of the brains of women who'd just given birth and early motherhood. And she said within minutes, she herself could tell the difference between the brain of a woman who'd had a child and the brain of a woman who hadn't.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And all this business about women being woolly-headed and so on after birth, it's not true. You know, women's brains actually can be enhanced by the whole process. So and the other thing is she intersperses this with really poetic sections where she describes motherhood in other creatures. So there'll be there's she starts off with slime mold. I mean, who knew you could make that sound attractive? I just absolutely love this book.
I love that you, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say about the brain and women who are pregnant or who've given birth, that their amygdala changes.
Yes.
The fear thing. I mean, maybe I heard you say that on one of your videos, Louise. I'm not sure, but I had just heard about that then it never goes back to its original or pre-motherhood size.
Exactly. So, you know, I just found, and I think this is an important book, not just for women who've had children. You know, this is something that we should be thinking about as a society. She raises all sorts of important, I would like my sons to read this. You know, I just feel it's just made me think very differently and open my eyes to certain things that I was very ignorant about. So it was a brilliant start.
I was just going to ask you that. So since you started with one that was, I mean, you chose it partly on size, which I can totally understand as you're looking at the towering stack. It was 16 books, right? That they
yeah.
And then to read it and be kind of blown away that it was one that you were sure you weren't going to like. How did you choose the next one you were going to read?
So the next one I chose was Doppelganger by Naomi Klein, because I'd never read anything of hers and I knew about her. And I thought that might be perhaps a more challenging read. So that came next. And what I'd go to another one and think, oh God, this is amazing as well. You know, it didn't really flag on me. At no point did I sort of get fed up, or I mean, Simon says this is controversial. I don't think it is. But I think I know I enjoyed reading the non-fiction long list more than any of the other fiction long lists I've read, which given that that's my normal diet, I think is quite interesting. And I felt like I'd done several degrees by the end of it. And all these different things.
I wonder if some of it is the timing, because you've retired and you're interested and you have the space, you know, to read this. Whereas for me, I know the difference between nonfiction and fiction is that fiction is kind of getting lost in a world, and whereas fiction or nonfiction, I'm usually learning something that's intriguing to me.
I think you're right. I think I know I was really nervous of missing my job, and you know, it's the sort of job where your brain's being stimulated all the time. You know, you don't stop thinking all day. So I think there's definitely an element of that, but I do think it's down to the quality of the books as well. I think it was a fantastic long list. It's interesting actually, because the next book that I've got here is Young Queens by Leah Redmond Chang, and this, what you were saying about being lost in another world, again, this is huge. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of pages it is, but it's a massive tome. And it focuses on Catherine de' Medici. So it's the 16th century, it's Europe. Catherine Medici grew up in Italy, but when she was quite a young girl, she was sent to France to marry the King of France, and became effectively, by the time she was 40, she became like a regent, because her child was going to be the next, you know, her son became king, but he wasn't really old enough. He was only about 10 or something. And it was at a time when Europe was in absolute turmoil, particularly from a religious perspective. She had a daughter called Elizabeth de Valois, who went off to marry Philip of Spain when she was very young. And she also became a kind of stepmother to Mary, Queen of Scots. And I think one of you is reading, the Antonia Fraser.
Yeah,
is that right,
it's on my
Chris?
list this summer. Yeah.
So you might find this a really interesting go-to book if you enjoy that, because the thing about this is she tells the story of these three women, and it's so thoroughly researched, and it's based on some new information that's emerged about these women. There are letters and things that have appeared, but I read it like I would read fiction. I couldn't put it down. And she does that thing that fiction writers do with structure, where you get really invested in Catherine de' Medici, and then it would switch to Mary, Queen of Scots, and I'd be really annoyed because you know what I mean. And then it would, so it and the sort of parallels between these women's lives, and it she writes about history in a way that it felt like time travel. Do you know what I mean? I kind of felt like I'd been with this women, and particularly the mother-daughter thing with Catherine de' Medici and Elizabeth de Valois, and that separation of, because, you know, once she'd gone to Spain, it was almost inevitable that she wouldn't see her mother again. Which, you know, for a young girl, and having to be, sorry, that's message pinging in, and having to be regal, you know, from a very young age, and all those sorts of pressures, she told that beautifully, and again, I couldn't put it down. I just gobbled it up.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah.
So I think
it reminds me of The Marriage Plot by have you read that by Maggie?
No.
Okay. Yeah. That was
that
Maggie O'Farrell.
The Marriage Portrait.
Oh, The Marriage Portrait. Did I say The Marriage Plot? Yeah,
okay.
The Marriage Portrait. Yeah.
I have read it and I loved it.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. I was thinking of The Dark Queens, but that was about two different queens, Matilda and Princess Brunhild. Oh, there you go. Dark Queen.
Brilliant. Oh, I see, I've not seen that.
Yeah, it's really good.
She was on an episode. We'll put that in the links down below.
You know, nonfiction that read almost like a novel.
Well, you're right. There's this term that, you know, authors talk about, that narrative nonfiction. And I think those are the ones that you feel like that, you know, you forget that you're actually reading nonfiction.
Exactly. I've got a third one here.
Yes.
And I think this is the one, Wifedom by Anna Funder. I think this is the one that I certainly saw more outrage about not being shortlisted, if you see what I mean. Certainly, you know, on social media. And again, have either of you come across this?
No, not that. The author, Stasiland is one that I'm familiar with, but not that book, Wifedom.
Right. So I read Stasiland quite a long time ago and really enjoyed it. So, you know, that was great because I'd got an author I recognised. And also I think I was going away somewhere, so I took it partly because it was paperback, because all the others, of course, are really heavy. And I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it. I'd heard quite a bit about it. It was probably the most publicised one at the time of the long list. And it tells the story of George Orwell's wife. And it's just, well, it made me really, really angry. It brought out tremendous rage, because I've always really admired, I'm not a fan of Animal Farm, which is very commonly taught in our secondary schools here. I've always managed to avoid teaching it. But I love his essays. I've always really thought they were just brilliantly written. And of course, 1984, you know, you've got to admire what he achieved there. So I sort of braced myself for this read, and I can't believe what a dreadful marriage it was from her point of view. And Anna Funder, she does fictionalize. Does she? I think she calls it counterfiction. So she actually unashamedly. So she basically, there are some letters that have come to light that Orwell's wife wrote to a friend. So she was doing some. Anna Funder was doing some research and came across these letters, and they revealed an awful lot more about the marriage than was in any of his sort of biographies. And that's one of the points that she raises, is that so much of biography has been written by men. And so basically the wife had pretty much been edited out of the story. Like she actually reread these biographies, and occasionally the wife might be mentioned twice, and not even by name, just the wife. So that was kind of, I think, what prompted her to write the book. And she does fictionalize. She goes into the head of, she's called Eileen, isn't she? Yeah, Eileen O'Shaughnessy. She goes into Eileen's head and does write Eileen's thoughts as if she's Eileen. But I really trust her as a journalist and as a researcher. So when I was reading those, I know some people were quite offended by that, but when I was reading those sections, I felt it really, because she was supplementing it with conventional, you know, non-fiction prose, I could trust her. And I mean, basically, without Eileen, Orwell would not have written most of those books, and he certainly wouldn't have had them published.
There's a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, but it's
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, no, I know you're being sarcastic, but it's the depth of it, and also his, you know, he went off to fight in the Spanish Civil War, didn't he? And she was out there most of the time. She would go out there, and she was doing something far more dangerous than he was. While he was out on the, you know, basically waiting for some sort of action, she was sort of involved in secret intelligence, and yet again, you know, none of this was really known about. So yeah, I thought this was tremendous as well. I really absolutely loved it, really did.
Oh, that's great. So those are 3 that didn't make the short list.
Yeah. So
Could you hold them up again? Would you mind?
Yeah, I can. So there's Wifedom by Anna Funder, and there's Young Queens by Leah Redmond Chang, which has got a really lovely turquoise cover in paperback here. See, I'm struggling with the weight of them. Just
Yes.
And this one's Matrescence by Lucy Jones.
So the full list was 16 books.
Yeah.
The short list is
6.
And those were 3 that you just showed that you wish had made the short list, but did not.
No. Absolutely. Yeah. And next week, I mean, I don't know when this recording will go out, but the 13th of June is the announcement of the winner, and I'm lucky enough to be going to the party.
That's exciting.
That was another question I had. Have you been to the party?
I have, yeah. I went originally, I think it was 6 years ago, maybe 7, when Simon persuaded me to read the long list with him, and I was really reluctant. You know, I've got a full-time job, don't be ridiculous, I can't possibly read 16 books in her or whatever. But they sent the books to me, and then I felt like I was obliged to. So, and I did manage it. I mean, I DNF'd the ones that, or I went back and finished them later, actually, to be fair. But you know, I'd if I got sort of, I don't know, 100 pages in and it really wasn't doing anything for me, then I would. So then I was invited as his +1. And the thrill for me now is I get invited in my own right.
That's awesome.
It sounds ridiculous, but actually it's really rather nice. So if I fall out with him, I'm still okay.
That's great. Well, that's one of the questions we have for you, is we know who inspired you to start a BookTube channel, but why did you start a BookTube channel?
So, well, Simon kept nagging me to do it. Not, you know, just to, I think he thought that I would enjoy it. And I was still not, I wasn't anti-social media or anything like that. I've always thought that the internet's a you know, a very positive place. It's just the way that we use it that's the issue. But I just thought, well, nobody wants to know, you know, what I think about books. But then when we started doing the videos together, there would be lots of positive comments, and a lot of people would say, you know, oh, your mum should start her own channel. And I just got to the point where he'd stopped nagging me about it, which, you know, it's a bit role reversal, really, isn't it, that? I was coming up to whatever birthday it was, and I thought, you know what, I am going to do this, but I don't want him to have anything to do with it. Don't want him to, because even choosing a name, as you will realize, I love book Cougars. I think it's brilliant. But you know, that's really tricky, isn't it? And there was always going to be a coattails element, obviously, with me. But yeah, so all of that, and I'd never recorded anything particularly, you know, so and I like learning new things, I suppose. And I honestly thought that it would last maybe 12 months and then, you know, it would die a death, but it's just it's just growing, and I love it, you know, presumably like you two do. It's an absolute delight. And particularly the conversations with the comments. I never understood how you could get to know people online. I didn't get it, you know, and my kids have all done that. The kids at school all do it. But I always thought that's really weird. How can you possibly, you know? But you do.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's been the most fun for us, is, you know, meeting people and getting to know listeners or viewers, or, you know, people that we listen to and watch. It's just so much fun. It's such a great community of people.
Exactly. And totally positive. I haven't had any, you know, nasty negative stuff at all thus far, anyway, you know, which is brilliant, isn't it? You know, and I live somewhere very rural, and I can't just walk down the road and chat to a friend about books, because there aren't that many people in the community I live in. I've got friends, you know, I can jump in the car and go and talk to a friend about a book, but I can't. Whereas here, it's just, you know, it's just immediate, isn't it? You can, and you meet so many wonderful people as well, like you two. You know, it's an absolute delight. I think it's a real force for good.
Yeah. So, especially when it comes to people who are willing to talk about books the way that we are. You know, not everybody is.
No, it's
lovely that you're providing that for people as well.
It's cool. Yeah, that's good. I love it. I think I'd really miss it if I stopped doing it now. I'm thinking of ideas as well. I mean, a lot of them are suggested by, you know, viewers, but also, you know, just something will ping into your head and you think, oh yeah, I'll go and have a look into that.
Well, we'll be watching and waiting.
Yes. And so you and Simon are doing a video about the winner, the shortlist and the winner, who you were projecting to be the winner. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we met over the weekend, and I do feel for our other halves, because we disappeared for about 4 hours. We really, you know, really look forward to it, and we have a total embargo. We're not allowed to talk about the prize at all until we do it. We both, I mean, it is one of the highlights of the year, because it's become part of the rhythm of the year. And so we did this year, obviously we did, well, not obviously, but we've done the non-fiction and fiction. So one of them, the fiction, will go out on his channel and the non-fiction on mine. Right. So we basically each rank ordered them, which is, it's like trying to choose between, you know, your favorite students. Not that I have favorite, you know what I mean? And we rank order them and then reveal, you know, as we go through. It was really interesting, you know. It always is.
And when will those videos be out, so people
so Simon's goes out next Tuesday, I want to say, which will be the 11th, I think, and mine will be the 12th, so that'll be the night before the actual.
Okay, leading up.
Great, good. Great. Well, we'll add those links when they're available down below as well, so people can find them.
Thank you. That's really kind. Yeah.
And Louise also has on her channel four parts, right? A 4-part series of reviewing your reading of the 16 nonfiction books. Really worth seeing. Yes. There's a video with you and Simon unboxing, as we talked about already. We'll put that link down below, which was really fun. And then videos of you going through the reading process.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
really fun. So would you like to share a book that you're currently reading with us now that
although it comes with a health warning. I don't know. I guess you will have come across this because it won the Booker Prize last year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have either of you read it yet?
I have not.
I've heard it's a handful.
Oh wow. I finished it. It's the first time in a long time that I've stayed up till 1 a.m. reading because I wanted to finish it. So it's Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, and Simon and I also do, sorry, this sounds like a plug, it's not, it's just coincidental, but we also do prompts which are suggested by viewers, and we have a jar in December time, and we pick out prompts for the year, so there's one for each month, and I'm woefully behind. Doesn't matter, partly because of all the Women's Prize reading. So the prompt for, I want to say March, no, I think it was April, was to read a book that was recommended by another booktuber. So I'd watched Jen Campbell, her vlog, and she'd chosen Prophet Song as her best read of 2023, and I happened to have it on my shelf, so I thought, right, okay, it's time I read it. I've heard a lot about it. I started it, and it is one of the most beautiful books and equally most horrific books I've ever read. I couldn't stop, and it's set in Ireland. It's really contemporary, so you can imagine it happening right now, this minute. And it starts with a woman. She's got a baby, she's got older children as well. One of them's about 16, 17. And she's just outside her house looking at the cherry blossom. She goes inside, there's a knock on the door, and it's the Gardaí, the Irish police, and they need to speak to her husband, and her husband isn't in. So she passes the message on to her husband, and he goes to the police, and basically she doesn't see him again. And so the book begins with her quest to sort of, try and get her husband released, etc., etc. But it's basically a exploration of how normal life can change at the drop of a hat if there's a regime change in your society. So it's an exploration of civil war, and the impact. What's wonderful about it is that it follows her. It's all about her experience of the whole, what happens to her husband, how things affect her children. So it's all about the mundane and the everyday. And he gets into a woman's head in the most amazing way. And I just absolutely loved her character as well. It's beautifully written. It's, you feel like you're inside her head. I can't recommend it highly enough, but it's very distressing. It gets darker and darker and darker and darker. And things happen that I didn't see coming. So it's very dystopian, but so plausible, really, really plausible. So yeah, I mean, I've just been, as an antidote today, I dipped into, there's a comedian called Jo Brand. I don't know if, I suspect she might not travel, but she's a really lovely, large, wonderful, jolly woman, and very potty mouthed. And so I've been dipping into her today just to kind of sort of recover from that experience.
Cleanse it. Yeah. Gosh. Well, are we going to share a book that we're reading?
Please do.
Because I could share one that requires a lot of light.
Go ahead.
It's a book about gardening.
Oh wow!
Specifically, actually about 6 women gardeners
Ah.
Let me read this. An Almost Impossible Thing, The Radical Lives of Britain's Pioneering Women Gardeners by Fiona Davison.
Oh,
And
wow.
so the time period is like the Edwardian time period, a little bit before and after. What is she? 1893 to 1914 are the years
wow.
she covers this. And so, prior to them trying to become professional gardeners, it was a, all boys club. The men were the gardeners who did the work and did the designing, and the women may have paid for things, but it was very much a man's world. And so at the very beginning, I want to read this quote because one of the things Davison talks about is the kind of the gender imbalance, that there were so many women at this time period, and a lot of the men from the British Empire were in other countries of the empire, such as
Yeah.
Canada and India. But this was from an advertisement in 1910. 10,000 English women could be ranged in a line and shot. No one would be sorry. Everyone would be glad. There isn't any place for them. So, talking just about the need for more men or to get the women places where they could be of use. So that's the culture, and the situation that these women gardeners were stepping into. I love gardening. I'm a big fan of Monty Don, and he blurbs this somewhere. He doesn't blurb it on the book, but I've seen blurbs with his name on it, talking about it. So I'm looking forward to diving in as spring is turning into summer here.
That's wonderful, because I've not come across that, and I'm a really keen gardener. That's why I'm all flushed today. So we're out.
Good, yeah. I saw it. I got it from Blackwell's actually, and I think it was in one of their email blasts or something. Is how I came upon it.
Fabulous, thank you. It's brilliant.
And then I have this. This is a short story collection. I've been doing a short story project for myself this year, where I'm reading a short story every Monday. And this is called Someplace Generous, an Inclusive Romance Anthology, edited by Elena Ellis and Amber Flame. And I just talked about this on episode 209 of the podcast and wanted a chance here to show off the beautiful cover. And this Generous Press is a new press that just began, and this is their inaugural book that they've published with 22 stories. And I'll just read from the inside what they say, the purpose of Generous Press. It says it publishes lush, high-caliber romance. It publishes lush, high-caliber romance fiction by brilliant BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and disabled authors. We tell finely crafted, poetic, cinematic, messy, weird, and swoon-worthy love stories, romance with a generous twist.
Oh.
So I'm really looking forward to it. I've started reading it, and then I downloaded the audiobook, and there's 5 narrators.
Oh.
So that's
wow, that's clever.
Yeah.
I love the word swoon worthy.
Yeah.
Beautiful, that cover. Both of those would be real positive, experiences for me, wouldn't they? After the reading Prophet Song, it's almost like you knew.
Well, I've heard so much about Prophet Song, but I've also heard, like I said, that it's a handful, that it really, you have to be in a certain space to be able to digest it. So
I think because it's so exquisitely written, I think that carries you through, actually.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, Louise, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us.
Yeah.
It's been great to meet you here, kind of almost in person.
Lovely. Yeah, no, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been really lovely. Thank you very, very much for having me as well. Yeah.
And enjoy that big party next week at the Women's Prize.
Don't you worry, I have to get my glad rags out.
And just a reminder to everybody, it's Louise Savidge Muses is the name of her channel. So subscribe, and you're going to be exposed to a lot of great bookish goodness there.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely of you to say so. Thank you.